Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Chuck Tiller, Operations Manager of Salem Radio Houston, and the local morning show host on Bill Bennett's Morning in America on 1070 KNTH. We want to thank you for coming this evening. This event is sponsored in part by Houston Baptist University and the Magellan Society. And this is America Unplugged. In a few minutes, we're going to be joined on stage with Salem Radio National Talk Show host Michael Medved, former talk show host Mike Reagan, and now currently working with OnlineTaxRevolt.com, leading Team Reagan Marching for America on April the 15th, and the governor of the great state of Texas, Governor Rick Perry. Now, for 5 years, NewsTalk 1070 KNTH, under the leadership of General Manager Chuck Jewell, has slowly built our team and evolved our method of broadcasting. And that evolvement continues on the air and on the internet at 1070knth.com. And now, if you'll go to our website and click on the mobile icon, you can download an application for your iPhone and your BlackBerry. Now you can hear 1070 KNTH anywhere. So check us out, 1070knth.com, and download the application. At this time, I want to mention our KNTH broadcast team, Linda Jocelyn, Ken Garza, and Ron Samuels. We couldn't get the job done without their hard work, and that happens 7 days a week and sometimes around the clock. Now I want to acknowledge the man who has served as the third president of the Houston Baptist University since August 2006. HBU has experienced unprecedented growth with the addition of 2 new facilities, the University Academic Center and the 6-story residence college called the Lake House. Freshman enrollment more than doubled since 2006. Additionally, during his brief tenure, HBU has launched an honors college and developed a College of Continuing Studies. He has served as the president and chancellor of Baylor University, where he was a member of the faculty and founding dean of the Truett Seminary. He's published extensively and pastored churches throughout Texas and beyond. He's a recipient of numerous awards. He serves on both corporate and community boards. He's also a native Texan. We wouldn't have it any other way. He was born in Coleman, Texas, grew up in Abilene. He is married to the former Sue Collier of Cisco, Texas. The Sloans have 7 children and 6 grandchildren. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you the president of Houston Baptist University, Dr. Robert B. Sloan, Jr. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Chuck, thank you so much. Welcome to Houston Baptist University. We are so honored to have you on our campus for this very special evening. 2010 is a very exciting time for HBU as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the founding of the university. 25 founding fathers, Christian, civic, and business leaders from across the city envisioned a Christian liberal arts university intentionally planted in the midst of this metropolis. They wanted their university to engage the city rather than seek refuge from it, as is the case with so many Christian liberal arts universities across the nation. Today, we're indebted to men like Stuart Morris, Archie Dunham, and Bruce Beelan, who, through their lifelong commitment to Christian higher education, have made it possible for many thousands of students to reach their goals, to serve God, and to serve the world. During the last few years, we have enjoyed a tremendous growth, as Chuck mentioned, in both the size of our student body and in the number of our facilities. Indeed, this very facility we're in tonight, the Dunham Theater in the Morris Cultural Arts Center, has become a great center of activity for the city as the church, as the faith engages the world, or as we sometimes say in our 12-year vision called the 10 Pillars, Jerusalem meets Athens. Since the construction of this facility, we've had the opportunity to host many distinguished speakers and performing arts groups. Former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright came here as the guest of the Houston Holocaust Museum. The Houston Symphony has performed here, much to our delight. Last fall, the Heritage Foundation hosted a 2-day symposium called Seek the Welfare of the City. The great pro-life champion, Archbishop Charles Chaput, gave a major address here only a couple of weeks ago. Daniel Cardinal DiNardo expounded the Gospel of John in this facility just last week in such a way as to have our students on the edge of their seats. One of our best partnerships has been with KNTH 1070 AM. They've brought a wonderful series of speakers here, and we've been delighted to host them. Former Secretary of Education William Bennett, Hugh Hewitt, Michael Gallagher, Michael Medved, again tonight, and Dennis Prager have all come in support of their Houston station. Tonight I'm pleased to welcome you to another lecture, to another event in a series of discussions sponsored by KNTH 1070 AM. The speakers in this series, to which we've played host, offer exactly the kind of conversation that as a university we think is very much needed. A conversation which is in the nature of thoughtful reflection, which reflects intellectual curiosity without artificial borders or excessively narrow specialization. These are conversations about the shape of our national community, the shape of our political and social and religious and ethical culture, and the way we live our lives as citizens and as people of faith. We're pleased to welcome back Michael Medved, who's making his third trip to the stage here at HBU. Michael Reagan, a well-known author, talk show host, and the son of the great American president who won the Cold War and helped liberate Eastern Europe, is also here. And a very special edition, which we're all thrilled to announce, the leader of the Lone Star State, Governor Rick Perry. Governor Perry, we are so thankful and glad that you are here with us. I cannot help but mention a personal experience. On several occasions, a number of years ago, I was living in another city and was involved in quite a struggle over various important issues. And Governor Perry, out of the blue, went to the trouble. He found my personal cell phone. Still not sure exactly how he got it, but I think through a mutual friend. And more than once, he called me to say, you know, President Sloan, hang in there. We support you. You're doing a great job. And Governor Perry, I have never forgotten that spontaneous, informal, friendly, and very encouraging series of phone calls. I will remember it forever. Charles Baccaris, HBU's Vice President for Advancement, will introduce our special guest tonight. Charles works directly with our alumni and many university friends in building relationships across the community. Charles Baccaris brings to HBU an extensive background in government service, including 4 consecutive terms as Harris County District Clerk. Prior to that, Charles Baccaris worked in the White House as the Associate Director of President Reagan's Office of Media Relations and the Assistant Director of the Office of Public Liaison for President George H.W. Bush. Away from HBU, his community service includes being appointed by Governor Perry to chair the Texas Department of Information Resources Board. Charles Baccaris, we're glad you're at HBU. Come now, please, and introduce these special guests for us.
Thank you, Dr. Sloan, and welcome to Spring Break edition of our KTNH conversation. What I want you to do tonight is make sure you start now thinking about the questions that you want to have submitted this evening. Hopefully, when you checked in, you got one of these cards. I want to encourage you to begin thinking about your questions and filling that card out now. Our ushers will be circulating up and down the aisles very shortly to pick those cards up from you, and then we'll do our best to get them up to the governor as he will moderate our discussions this evening. The way this is going to work is I have the privilege of introducing Michael Reagan to us first. He will come out and speak, and then I'll come back and introduce Michael Medved. He'll speak, and then I'll introduce our special guest, Governor Rick Perry, and he will host a conversation up here, and your questions will be included at that time. So let's get this started right now. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing to you Mr. Michael Reagan. Michael is the eldest son of former President Ronald Reagan. He has authored many successful books, including his latest book, Twice Adopted. Michael is a popular national speaker on issues related to conservative politics, adoption, and the life lessons he learned from his father, Ronald Reagan, and his mother, Academy Award-winning actress Jane Wyman. Michael has hosted a live radio show for over 26 years on the Premier Radio Network. In addition to his role as president of the Reagan Legacy Foundation, he serves on the board of the John Douglas French Alzheimer's Foundation and is a board member and national spokesperson for the My Stuff Bags Foundation, a unique program that addresses some of the immediate physical and emotional needs of children rescued from abuse and neglect. Michael has raised millions of dollars for many other notable charities, including the United States Olympic Team, Cystic Fibrosis, the Juvenile Diabetes Foundations, and the Statue of Liberty Restoration Fund, the Santa Barbara and the San Diego Navy Leagues, and the San Diego Armed Services YMCA. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a great Texas welcome to Michael Reagan.
You know, and I never would have been able to accomplish it had I not lived long enough to get to Medicare. And now they want to take it away. You live that long and the government wants to take these things away from you. How's everybody doing? Okay, now, you know, if we do this thing right, this half, I want to try this out, because this is how I remember Texas, okay? That's how I remember. We're going to pretend this side over here is from California because you're on my left. And we're going to think this side over here, right down the middle, is Texas, okay? We're going to pretend we're in Kansas City, and it's 1976, all right? And the Texas side is going to say Viva, and the California side is going to say Ole, all right? We ready? 1, 2, 3.
Viva! Ole! Viva! Ole! Viva! Ole!
You know, it's great, isn't it? I tell you, that's what I remember about 1976, was Texas and California. You all had it right from the beginning. It just took a little bit long for the rest of the country to catch up with you. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. It's great to be here tonight with all these great people, the governor, of course, Michael Medved and the school here, and to be able to speak to you tonight and spend a few moments with you. You know, some other things I remember about 1976 was the first time in my life my father lost. And you really tell the character of a person when they lose something, how they react. And we didn't know my father was going to come down and speak to the convention that night. In fact, we were so sure he wasn't going to speak that everybody in the Reagan family and most of their friends exited the building in our cars, went back to the hotel so we would beat the rush after Gerald Ford got done speaking. And we were sitting actually in a restaurant having a glass of wine when Gerald Ford finished his speech, looked up at my father's booth and said, "Ronnie, come on down, bring Nancy and say a few words." And we all looked at each other like, oh my gosh, are we missing something here? And my father came down, went up to the microphone and turned to an audience, and he talked about a letter that he had been asked to write that would be put into a time capsule that would be opened up on the 300th birthday of the United States of America. And he talked about the daunting task that he had to write something for people that would know everything about us, but we would know nothing about them. And he talked about driving up the coast of California and having the ocean on his left, San Ynez Mountains on his right, and he thought to himself, do I write about the freedoms that America has today, knowing that if we do not make the right decisions, those people who live in 2076 may not even have the right to open up the time capsule to read the letter that he, in fact, was going to pen. He says, do I write about nuclear proliferation and the nations of the world that have these ugly missiles aimed at each other and at any moment can push a button and destroy a people? But he said, depending on the decisions we make today, they will know whether we used those weapons. And it really does come down to decisions. And he talked about a call to arms. All of us, a call to arms, that we have to have bold colors and stand tall to fight for those things that are so important to us. And I think about that as I think about where we are today in America. It's now 2010. My father's been gone for 6 years. But the fact is, we're still in a position where the decisions we make today are going to affect those that still are going to be able to read those letters, or that letter, I hope, in 2076. And it's not a time, as I was saying last night to someone, as Lady Thatcher said to George H.W. Bush at one time, now is not the time to go wobbly. Now the time to stand tall and speak of bold colors and really do something. Newt Gingrich asked me about a year ago, what is it that when I win an election, Michael, the party falls apart. Or when your father wins, the party falls apart. Or when conservatives win, we seem to fall apart. I said, because conservatives see elections as an endpoint. And those who are against freedoms that we have see it as a beginning. And if you think of those who would take away your freedoms like termites in your home, eating away at the foundations of your home each and every day, they don't do it just every 2 years. They do it every day of the year. And I think we're finding out now, if we're not fully engaged 24/7 to eradicate the termites, then all the foundations ultimately will be eaten away, and we will have no freedoms left at all. And the freedom will not be there for those to read the note that my father wrote that'll be in that time capsule. My father so loved this country, so loved it, and gave all of himself for the United States of America and for her people. And so I, as his son, carrying on that legacy, am doing that not only here in the United States, but around the globe. We'll talk more about it tonight. It's going to be a great night, a lot of Q&A, a lot of talk. But I want to thank you all for coming out here tonight. You have heard the call to arms. You are going to be engaged. And tonight when this is over, don't go home and say, hey, that was a great event. It was really wonderful. And put it down in your book and say, wow, look who was there. You leave here tonight and you begin the process of changing the world and making it a better place to live. You have it within your hands to be able to do it. I know it because on 3, we're going to hear it again. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reagan. It was the privilege of my young life to serve your father in the White House, and his amazing vision for our country is not going to be lost anytime soon. And I appreciate your moving around this country, reminding us of that legacy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I next have the privilege of introducing to you a man who is becoming quite familiar to us here at HBU, thankfully, and that is Mr. Michael Medved. Michael is a nationally syndicated radio talk show host, best-selling author, and veteran film critic. His daily 3-hour program, emphasizing the intersection of politics and pop culture, reaches close to 5 million listeners in over 200 markets coast to coast. For 12 consecutive years, he's been listed by Talkers Magazine as one of their heavy 100 most important American talk show hosts. And for 7 of those years, his show has also been listed as one of the top ratings in the top 10 of all ratings nationally. Born in Philadelphia and raised in San Diego, Mr. Medved graduated with honors from Yale and then attended Yale Law School, where he and his classmates, Bill and Hillary Clinton, were very busy, but I think on opposite ends of the spectrum. After working as a screenwriter in Hollywood, he reviewed movies for CNN and later as chief film critic for the New York Post. He also served for 12 years as co-host of Sneak Previews, the nationally televised weekly movie review show on PBS television. Mr. Medved is the author of 12 nonfiction books, and his book, The 10 Big Lies About America, spent 12 weeks on the New York Times bestseller extended list and became a main selection of the Conservative Book Club. The follow-up volume, The 5 Big Lies About American Business, was released December 1st, 2009, and it is already a main selection of the Conservative Book Club. Mr. Medved has been a frequent guest on all the major TV talk shows, including Larry King Live, Nightline, Oprah, David Letterman, Good Morning America, CNN's Reliable Sources, and countless others. His columns on media and society appear regularly in the USA Today, where he serves as a member of the Board of Contributors. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome back to HBU Mr. Michael Medved.
Thank you for a much too thorough introduction. I mean, basically, I'm here as the warm-up act for Governor Perry. And I'm very, very proud to serve that function. Just a couple of quick observations about this painful and pregnant and remarkably heavy political moment at which we find ourselves. I cannot remember anything like this. And people are genuinely upset. We get the calls, I get the emails. Apparently people in Washington, D.C. are saying that there is an all-time record in terms of the congressional phone lines, in terms of people trying to contact their members of Congress, particularly their House members. Keep it up, by the way, because this decision is not made, it is open. But I want to try to look on the bright side for a few moments with you, and then we'll have a chance when we're responding to questions to look realistically. And looking on the bright side, I remember when we traveled around the country doing the 100 Days of Obama tour, one of the most frequent questions we got at the time was, what is the one positive achievement that you can find in President Obama's first 100 days? And I remember at the time people said, well, it's the fact that he authorized the killing of those pirates off the coast of Somalia. And I used the line that I said, well, he didn't really authorize attacks on pirates. He thought they had asked, would you authorize a tax on pirates? And, you know, that fit perfectly in the Obama agenda. But now I want to tell you, there truly is, if you look at the first 16 months of President Obama, there is finally a great achievement. I want to tell you what it is. And I am deeply grateful to the President for this. Really, I mean this with all my heart. President Obama has done something that no president since Ronald Reagan has been able to do. He has done something that President Bush couldn't do, certainly something President Clinton couldn't do. He has done something that first President Bush absolutely couldn't do. President Obama has succeeded where they failed. He has succeeded in unifying the Republican Party. And if you look and you listen to these people, I spent a little bit of time today for my sins watching C-SPAN, and it was actually, I couldn't believe it, one member of Congress after the other on the Republican side. These guys were eloquent, they were impassioned, and they were in agreement. It is a remarkable thing. 41 senators, 177 members of the House, not one dissenting voice on this crucial health care issue. And this is a very good thing. Regardless of how this final vote comes, there is conservative momentum that I have not seen since President Reagan, the first Republican that I ever voted for, since President Reagan left the scene. So how can we mess it up? There are three dangers I want to warn about very quickly. First of all, the danger of anger. There's lots to be angry about in the United States. But learn from President Reagan, do not give in to anger. Do not give in to conspiracy theories. Do not give in to rage. It doesn't work. It is a political loser. Angry candidates, angry individuals lose. They don't win. You don't attract people to you by anger. Was President Reagan's image angry? Are you kidding? President Reagan didn't get angry when he had a bullet in his chest. I mean, it's a remarkable difference. We cannot allow ourselves to become the grumpy party, okay? It doesn't work. They talk about the happy warrior, not the snarky, angry warrior. And that brings me to another danger, and that's the danger of civil war, okay? The greatest ordeal in this nation's history, of course, was the war between the states. Was a war of brothers. And you know what? President Reagan said, and he said it so well, if somebody agrees with me 70% of the time, that doesn't make him my enemy. People who want to go out there on a rhino hunt, oh, he's not a real Republican, oh, he's not a real conservative. For God's sake, It's the Battle of Gettysburg right now. You don't turn to the person next to you and say, are you sufficiently abolitionist? There is a question here of the survival of the Republic. We need all the support we can get on one core issue. And that core issue, and it's the only issue right now, which is stopping the insane spending and stopping the growth of government. Do you favor expansion of Washington's intrusion in our lives, or do you favor more liberty? That is the issue. And if people agree on that issue, let us work together, and we can talk about the other stuff later. The other stuff matters. But right now, the focus has to be sharp, and it has to be on building coalitions, not on making war on people with whom you agree most of the time. You build victory through addition and multiplication, not through subtraction and division. No successful party was ever built based on purges. That brings me to point number 3. We cannot give in to despair or defeatism or to negativity or to pessimism. Not acceptable, because that doesn't win. That's a loser. That becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. In my book that was mentioned here, and I do love this book, and I'm very proud of it, and I'm glad to sign copies for you later. But it's a book called The 10 Big Lies About America. And the last of the big lies is the big lie that says that America is in irreversible moral decline. Nothing is irreversible for America. Nothing is irreversible for Americans. And there are healthy signs all around us. Just look at our own lives. Look at the lives we're privileged to lead. We cannot give in to defeatism. We cannot give in to pessimism. The answer to defeatism and pessimism isn't some enforced optimism, it's gratitude. It's looking around and recognizing how much we need to feel grateful for. And there's one area in which we can help ourselves avoid all 3 of these dangers. And that is, frankly, affirming our common faith in our protector and our creator. And the reason I say that is because if you look at all of these things, the idea of not giving in to anger, it's part of what God calls us to do. The opposite of happiness isn't unhappiness, it's anger, because you're then blind to all the reasons that you have to be grateful and to be happy and to be positive. And you can never bring people to share the good news. And the second point, the idea of making civil war, if we are all children of God, let alone children of God who agree most of the time, there is far less reason to see someone with whom you disagree as your enemy rather than somebody else to persuade, which is the right way to see them. And on the third point, the point about despair, particularly despair about America, God's hand has been on America from the beginning. And it is manifest, and it is evident, and it is undeniable. It is undeniable whether you happen to be any flavor, any denomination of believer. You know, even Oscar Wilde, a rather corrupt Englishman, during his famous lecture tour of the United States, once observed rather sniffily, God, in his infinite wisdom, has a special providence for imbeciles, drunkards, small children, and the United States of America. At least he was right about the special providence. That providence will continue, and it will because of the kind of leadership that we have from leaders like Governor Perry, who you're going to hear from in just a moment. That providence will continue to shelter and sustain this greatest nation on God's green earth. Thank you.
Well said, as always, Mr. Medved. Thank you. Folks, don't forget, get these cards in. And now it gives me great honor and pleasure as a native Texan to introduce a man who has served our state so well in so many ways. And he continues to desire to serve our state. and he's making a difference, not only in the state of Texas, but in the United States of America, in the discourse about the directions our country should go in. So without further ado, let me ask you to welcome the governor of the great state of Texas, Governor Rick Perry.
Howdy. It is good to be in your presence. It's good to be on this campus. And I don't know whether Dr. Sloan is sitting where I can actually see his face, but he is one of my favorite educators and administrators, and this university hit a home run when they got him. So well done. And to Salem Communications, we want to say thanks to you all for allowing us to come and being a part of tonight. And when you're driving in your car, turn it up to 1070 and listen to KTNH. So you get the real story. So anyway, it's a pleasure to be in Houston and to honor a man that I think he embodied the essential values of America. Ronald Reagan was not so much a man ahead of his time, but he was a champion of the values that we think about, the principles, the precepts that and very much grounded in common sense and simple faith and a belief in the individual. Now, he was known as the great communicator, and I always wonder sometimes, Michael, if people who might not agreed so much with what he was saying, they talked and praised how he spoke and talked about what a great communicator he was. And sometimes I think they did that to take away from what he said and what he believed. And I think it's really important for us to think about that differentiation, because the current occupant of the White House is a very good reminder of the huge risk that we take as a country to select a leader based on style rather than substance. I happen to believe that the values and the principles that Ronald Reagan espoused as not just as the president, but as a governor and as a father and as an individual, they were substantial. Consider what he said in 1977 as our country was kind of sliding into this 4-year span of navel gazing and hand-wringing. It was also known as the Carter Presidency. In commenting on that very liberal affection for spending, he said, when a conservative says that it is bad for government to spend more than it takes in, he is simply showing the same common sense that tells him to come in out of the rain. Your dad was a Texan at heart. I mean, you think about that. He truly was. And look, that applies today. I mean, it applies today, and it illustrates the essential difference between, the Washington style, spend it all, spend it now mentality, and doing things Texas style. Here in Texas, we prefer to keep things simple. We like our government limited, our taxes low, and our opportunity unlimited. Unfortunately, Washington seems to be hell-bent on reversing the progress that we made in this state. They're infringing on our constitutional rights. They are burying future generations in a mountain of debt, and all the while they're claiming they're just doing the will of the people. Well, interesting. Since you all are the people, let me ask you a couple questions just to kind of see if you confirm or disapprove of their thinking. Did anyone in this room ask Washington for laws and regulations that will cripple our energy industry and kill jobs? Did you ask them for national education standards that will reduce the quality of our workforce? No. Did you ask them for legislation that will essentially nationalize health care, driving down the quality while increasing costs for you and your fellow Texans by roughly $24 billion over the next 10 years? No. That's what I thought. You know, instead of driving up taxes, threatening people with fines, injecting themselves into our most intimate decisions relative to health care decisions, folks in Washington need to answer a few questions of their own. Where are the discussions of giving states the authority to make local decisions that are best suited for their citizens? Why does Washington treat tort reform like it is a radioactive substance? Why are they so afraid of market-driven principles? Those are the questions that need to be asked. Those are the questions that will lead to real reform in Washington, but they're clearly not interested in having a discussion with everyday Americans. In my view, our federal government is more out of touch with people than ever before. Since the mid-1970s, when I really started watching closely Washington's interaction, and as a young man in the Air Force, as I was traveling around the world, and I really started seeing how different countries treated their people. And I was, blessed as a pilot in the Air Force to live in a lot of different countries. And I saw theocracies and democracies and monarchies and dictatorships and other types of representative government. And I've never seen our federal government so intentionally indifferent to her people. And if you don't think the tricks that they're pulling out of their bag to ramrod this health care bill through doesn't prove my point, then take a look at Obama's budget, newest budget numbers. They've just been out in the last 30 days. Something is clearly wrong when an administration rolls out a spending plan that anticipates more than $5 trillion worth of debt in the next 5 years. That's the deficit just in the next 5 years. It gets worse when Congress sends legislation to the President that not only allows the United States Congress to borrow an additional $1.9 trillion, but hikes the national debt ceiling to $14.3 trillion. Who in here, if you applied those same type of budget concepts to either your personal life or your business, would stay out of jail? And they come pick you up. They would. I know, over the course of the last months, and I have not been the biggest cheerleader for Washington. And don't get me wrong, I love Washington. I love their monuments. They got great museums. The cherry blossoms in the spring, it's a beautiful thing. But I think it's simply time for them to focus on their basic responsibilities, to set and maintain essential priorities, retreat to the boundaries that are detailed in the 10th Amendment. You're welcome to hold your breath until that happens, but your fellow Texans, let me tell you, we're going to focus on maintaining and sustaining this strong economy that we have in this state. And look, we're not immune to this global economic recession that's going on. You cannot be the #1 exporting state in the nation and not be impacted by what's going on surrounding us and inside of this country. but our efforts to create jobs. I mean, there are Texans out there that are facing the challenges of joblessness, and what we need to be doing as a state is making sure that we are creating an environment, which we have done, that every person who has lost a job in this country wishes they lived in Texas, because they know that if there's one place that you want to live that will have jobs created before any other state, it is in Texas. And I say that with some pretty good numbers to back it up. A very well-known economist over the course of the last couple of months, Texas has stayed an average of 2 percentage points below the unemployment level nationally. He said that we would be the last in and the first out of this recession. At last check, our unemployment rate is the lowest of the 10 largest states. We produced more private sector jobs during the decade that we just finished than any other state in America. Forbes magazine identified our debt level as the lowest of the 10 largest states. As a matter of fact, they said just last week, if there is a poster child for economic recovery in America, it is Texas. What those numbers say, and others that build on that, is that we, at our core, we have created a strong economy in Texas, and we have a state government that is committed to those strong fiscal disciplines, and we're willing to stick to the basics. I tell folks, I said, look, I'm just a little animal science major from the beloved Texas A&M, but I get it. When it comes to the principles of governing, they're really pretty simple. You don't have to be a PhD from Harvard in political science to understand the principles of governing. Keep your taxes low, have a regulatory climate that is fair and predictable, have a legal system that does not allow for oversuing, and have a public school system that is accountable, that develops a skilled workforce for the people that want to hire those individuals. Then get out of the way and let the private sector do what the private sector does best: create jobs and wealth. Ronald Reagan knew that the principles of governing were simple, but he also knew the difficult part of governing was finding men and women who had the courage to stand up to implement those principles. And that is what we have been able to do in this state. And I'm very proud of the men and women that I've worked with and continue to work with in Austin that has put Texas at the apex of the states. Before we start the question and answer period, I want to, with your indulgence, I want to share with you what I consider to be one of Ronald Reagan's really great quotes, and it bears remembering. He said that the common sense and the common decency of ordinary men and women working out their own lives in their own way, this is the heart of American conservatism today. And that common sense, that common decency remains at the heart of conservatism, whether it's in any other state in America or in our beloved Texas. So let's give these leading voices of conservative talk radio and conservative voices across the country an opportunity here. I've got some questions that have been handed in, and some others that have come in, I think, through the radio station. That they've sent some in to be asked tonight, and so I'm going to get the great opportunity to ask a few of these while the Michaels banter between themselves, and one of the things that we found rather interesting last night was to kind of compare the 40th President of the United States with the 44th President of the United States. And it didn't take long to find some rather stark differences. But here's one of the questions, Michael, either one, either Medved or Reagan can take this, both of you actually. At the end of his first year, President Obama gave himself a B+ for his performance so far. What grade would you give him, particularly in the handling of the economy? Michael?
F. I mean, you just mentioned it. I mean,
Don't think about it. Expand on that.
Yeah, I mean, I stand on that. I mean, the fact that what he do to the economy, he's tanked the economy of the United States of America. You know, my father called it trickle-down economics. And see, I know about trickle-down economics because I lived it before you did. See, my dad taught it right in the old house. And so I understand trickle-down economics. What this president, the 44th president, has done, he's created trickle-up poverty.
I'll read that one again.
I mean, that's what he's done.
Yeah.
And it's not getting any better. It's getting worse. And that's what's sad. The very people who could get us out of this and create the jobs are the people now that are truly being hurt by this economy. And that's what's really sad. If you're going to put people back to work in this country, you've got to unleash the private sector. When the private sector can't get a loan, private sector can't go out and grow their businesses, create the jobs to get us out of it, you're in trouble. And that's what this president and his cohorts in Washington, D.C. have in fact done.
I do think that President Obama, when he graded himself, called some very, very useful attention to a terrible national problem almost everywhere except for Houston Baptist University, which is grade inflation. It's a terrible thing when that happens. And I mean, a B+, here's an amazing thing. And I don't know if you saw Michelle Obama, about 3 weeks after the president was asked to grade himself. She was asked in one of the interviews she was doing, how would you grade yourself as First Lady? And she immediately said, that's a ridiculous question. I don't grade myself. I don't spend my time doing that. It would be presumptuous. I'd look ridiculous if I graded myself. Exactly. She wouldn't be as bad as this one is. Really. I mean, there's at least a certain common sense there. When people ask you a question, you don't immediately jump back and say B+. And say, but I would have gotten an A, except I wouldn't go quite as far as my friend Michael Reagan, because I would give him a good solid D. And only because it could be even worse. It could be even, imagine if Nancy Pelosi were making all the economic decisions, not just 90% of them. It could be worse. Yeah. So D is my answer.
Then I'll give you this. We'll go with the D, but on Friday, it could be an F.
Ah.
Yeah, there you go.
Amen. You got it.
There you go. You know, we think back and how quickly the landscape has changed over the course of the last 14 months. And you think about last January. I mean, think about January of '09 and the general feeling all across this country, particularly in conservative circles, that we had just been handed possibly the worst national defeat, certainly in my memory that I can think of, and that the future of the Republican Party, the future of conservatism, did not particularly look bright 14 months ago. And then something rather interesting and powerful and organic happened. And I pinpoint it back to the 15th day of April of last year. And there were tea parties that cropped up all across this country. And, I mean, just average, everyday working moms and dads. I mean, these people look like my sister, my mom, my dad, my children, showing up and very articulately in many cases, and very vocally in most cases, and very opinionated, talking about that America was on the wrong track. And I'm obviously talking about the Tea Parties. And you mentioned Nancy Pelosi, and she has repeatedly referred to the grassroots Tea Party as AstroTurf. And
That's an affront to Houston.
so,
I mean, come on. This is the home of AstroTurf,
so
right?
what I'd like to get you two guys just to reflect on is, with her making that statement and deriding the efforts of those millions of Americans, how do you make the elections in New Jersey and in Virginia, and then the Scott Brown victory in Massachusetts all jive with it being AstroTurf?
They've dropped the line. They don't say that anymore. And again, what is fascinating to me is how they have shifted their whole explanation for their agenda and what they're doing. Is once upon a time they claimed that they had a mandate. They don't really claim that anymore. If you listen to Pelosi and particularly to Harry Reid, even Dick Durbin, who may be the most honest member of the Democratic leadership, the one who admitted that, contrary to what the president said, our health premiums are going to go up if this monstrosity is actually passed. What they're now saying is that it takes courage. We have to do this because we know the American people don't want it, but we know so much better than they do that once we put it in place, they're going to love it. They'll feel much better. It's like the doctor who comes and says, well, this lobotomy will only hurt for a moment. And then after we bore into your skull and remove some of your brain matter, then everything will be fine and happy. Look, this is an appalling example of the worst kind of elitism. The notion that Washington needs to not persuade the American people, not build a consensus, what Ronald Reagan did so well, but we need to impose our will, and then afterward, it's like Nancy Pelosi saying that, well, we've got to pass the bill so we can see what's in it. And then after we pass the bill, everyone will say, oh, it's so wonderful, it feels so good. And she said, yes, yes. I mean, please, this is increasingly pathetic, and frankly, I feel the resistance not dissipating but building.
You know, and also, I mean, they completely misread the Tea Party people. I mean, they thought they were all conservative Republicans that were out there. That's all that were in the building. I was that April 15th with Neil Cavuto in Sacramento on the steps of the Capitol that day, and there was about 10,000 people that showed up. They thought 1,200 were going to come. Like 10,000 people showed up. And it was every make and model that showed up in Sacramento, as were showing up all the other places, you know, across this country. I'm speaking April 15th in Mansfield, Ohio, to a Tea Party group, you know, this year. It is made up of people, because what they have done is not just attack the right, they've attacked everybody. This healthcare situation isn't just going to, you know, hurt the people who are conservative. It's going to hurt anybody who's alive who has health care today. And so it's an equal opportunity, I'm going to get you, and the arrogance of it. But this is what they've always done. They've always, you know, they've always made it personal. Let's attack Ronald Reagan. Let's attack George, you know, W. Bush. Let's attack George H.W. Bush. Let's attack the Tea Party people and all these things. And look what's happened. Less people are reading their newspapers. Less people are watching them on television. You know, and what happened is they rejuvenated, or they didn't have to rejuvenate, but they got those people so fired up that you got 2 new governors. You have the Shays Rebellion happened again in Massachusetts, you know, just about a month ago. But this time, you know, Scott Brown took over the seat of Ted Kennedy. It's unbelievable. What we have to do is not just rest on our laurels. We have to take it and move with it.
Yeah, the Tea Parties were fascinating to be engaged with, and continue to watch their very organic movement.
I have a brother, you know, liberal, who came out a couple of weeks ago and said that our father would not support the Tea Party movement in this country. And I said, whoa. I said, wait a minute. When I was campaigning during the 70s and 80s, stuff like that, I didn't see Ron around too much. And the fact is, our father would have supported the Tea Parties because my father, his movement, the reason he became president is because of the grassroots movement he put together that made him the president of the United States of America. That's why I know he would support the Tea Parties. And something else about my dad. When my dad decided to run again in 1980 for the presidency, and he, the family is pulled together, and we're sitting in the living room of the house up in Pacific Palisades, and Dad came out of the bedroom, surprised that everybody was there, and he was saying to us, he said, you know something? He said, I just got back from Atlanta, Georgia. And he said, everywhere I go is just like Atlanta. He says, I get off of a plane, I go to a hotel, the bellman, hands me a note. Governor, you got to run for president. And again, I get to my room. The chambermaid left seized candy and a note on my pillow. Governor, you've got to run again. He says, it doesn't matter if it's Omaha, Chicago, Atlanta, Georgia, it doesn't matter. It's chambermaids and bellhops. They're all telling me to run. He says, and so I have decided that I'm going to run again for the presidency. And I tell that story was because he didn't say, David Rockefeller called me. The president of Coca-Cola called me. The president of Pepsi called me. Bob McNair called me from over here at the Houston, Texas, called me to run. Chambermaids and bellhops. Now, what's interesting is my sister Maureen and myself and my wife Colleen go out for a glass of wine afterwards. And my sister Maureen, God bless her, raises her glass of wine. She says, well, if he doesn't make it this time, we're running for the presidency of the Chambermaids and Bellhops Union. But my father was a grassroots guy and would have been supportive of that movement and if he were alive today.
Yeah, I want to change gears just a second here and talk about I do want to spend most of our time tonight on the economy and health care, but I want to talk about one international issue that's out there that's really troubling for me as a person who, number one, of Christian faith, teaches me to support the country of Israel. It's the only democracy in the Middle East. Economically, they're a very powerful trading partner for the United States, and yet we have a president and his administration that just over the course of the last couple of weeks have made some of the most divisive and derogatory statements towards I would suggest our only friend in the Middle East that we can count on day in and day out. And I'd just like to get y'all's response on that.
Yeah, I'd love to speak on that because, Governor, I didn't have a chance to speak to you before. Earlier this morning, I spoke to my brother Jonathan, who was very, very honored. My brother Jonathan went to make his life in Israel 19 years ago. And he has one son who's already completed his military service and another son who's in training, officer training for military career, and a third son about to go in. So he has skin in the game, as they say, when it comes to Israel's survival, aside from having been in business in Israel for 19 years. He had the great privilege of hosting Governor Perry when Governor Perry was visiting Jerusalem. And when I told John that we were going to be together again tonight, he said, well, be sure to tell the governor that if there were an election held in the state of Israel between Rick Perry and Barack Obama, it would be 10-1. It would be 10-1.
That's good. Just for the record, let me just say that is the one place I might consider other than...
Well, again, your Air Force background is also very appreciated there, sir. Okay, the one thing that I was thinking about today, and this has really been on my heart because we just got back from Israel. We went with a group of 125 listeners, and right now there are riots going on, and they're pretty serious riots. They're more than usual. I mean, a lot of these riots is basically some reporter from CNN calls up your local rent-a-thug and says, hey, Israel just did something. Are you angry about it? They said, sure. He said, okay, we're going to have a camera at 1 o'clock at this such and such a street. And then they come and throw stones. And they don't throw stones at anything in particular. They just throw stones for the camera. These riots today were more serious than that. And there were 9 police officers who were hurt. And what are the riots about? The riots, on the one hand, are about the Obama administration chastising Israel and emboldening the terrorists. What are they chastising Israel about? And you have to know this. It is not about settlements in Palestinian territory. It's not about anything having to do with that. What they are chastising Israel about is the right for Jewish people on Jewish-owned land in the Jewish capital, Jerusalem, of the world's only Jewish state, the right of Jewish people to build homes there on their own property. This is insane. It is insane. We are not talking, there's not a single, in the 1,600 housing units, there's not a single Palestinian home, not a single trailer, not a single squatter, no one who is being displaced. No one who is being displaced. If Jews do not have the right to build homes for themselves in an all-Jewish neighborhood of Jerusalem, where do they have the right to live on planet Earth? And this is such a serious matter in which, and by the way, let me say, and this is something, I actually had this conversation with President Carter. It is absolutely true, if you are a Palestinian Arab citizen of Israel, and 18% of the population of Israel is Arab Palestinian citizens who vote, there's a justice in the Supreme Court, they have 10 members of Knesset. If you are an Arab Palestinian citizen of Israel, there is not a scrap of real estate that is unavailable to you. You can buy a home anywhere. You can build a home anywhere. You go through the permitting process, fine. Every neighborhood, every district of Jerusalem. The idea that North Jerusalem, I mean, literally within a mile and a half of Israel's Capitol building, the Jewish people, the American administration says are not going to be allowed to live there and to make their homes there, it is an outrage. And it is the most arrant hypocrisy I can recall in the policy of an American government toward the Middle East.
And
If I can go on there, I mean, because I travel extensively overseas myself. We have a president here who really is making enemies of our friends and reaches out a hand to our enemies, thinking he's befriending them and they're befriending him. And we're going to come back and pay the big price on that at some point in time. In November, we opened up a Reagan exhibit at the Checkpoint Charlie Museum in Berlin. I was there for the 20th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And Barack Obama sent a videotape. You know, he went to wherever it was to bring the Olympics to Chicago, or wherever. He went to Copenhagen, but couldn't go for the 20th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Sent a tape. I was also in Poland on November 11th. That's the 20th anniversary of their independence. And nobody from the administration was there. Hillary Clinton had just dissed her counterpart from Poland. Joe Biden had embarrassed himself and made the Polish people mad. And when I was there, I was asked a question by the Polish president, sitting with him as his guest. Why did your president take away our missile defense? Why did he take away our missile shield? That afternoon, I would be asked by the ambassador to Poland from Czech, why did your president take away our missile defense, our missile shield? But with all that said, and we all in this room love Israel, why is it the Jews in America keep on electing people who hate them to the White House?
No. And I've said for years, this is about to change. And let me say, people here may not know this, but there is only one Republican candidate ever, well, since 1924. Coolidge did very well among American Jews. He really did. But since 1924, only one Republican candidate has won a plurality of the American Jewish votes. His name was Reagan, and the year was 1980. And it was precisely because people saw the reality, not the myth or the image, the reality of Jimmy Carter. And I can only hope that our people who can be a stiff-necked people, that's a phrase you may be familiar with, our people who can be stiff-necked and stubborn and blind and arrogant and really incredibly stupid. And Jews are not supposed to be stupid, but politically in the United States of America, it's appalling. And again, there are all sorts of deep reasons for this, but one of the things that I believe that more and more Jewish people are awakening to is something that Prime Minister Netanyahu understands. I've spoken to him about it. That Israel's best friends in the whole world are conservative Christians here in the United States of America.
Amen. Let's get back across the ocean and get back to mainland United States and talk about an issue that I think is probably on everyone's mind. And frankly, it's not just a United States issue because of the profound impact that the healthcare system in the United States has around the world, whether it's the drugs that we develop, whether it's the technologies that come out of our research institutions, et cetera, that if we were to lose this powerful, not only system of economic vitality, but also being able to impact people's quality of life around the world. So it's not just a United States issue here. This is a worldwide issue. If we do not block this health care bill that they're talking about today. And one of the things that here just within the last week that we have seen is that the Democrats have thrown in a government takeover of student loans into this health care debate. And so I think obviously to help talk some of their members who have rather cold feet and that are listening to their constituents back home to vote for it. So the straight-out question is, are they going to be able to pass this health care bill this time? And to kind of add a little spice to the mix, which would be worse for Democrats in November, passing health care or not passing it?
Well, I think I'll let Michael go first because he's been making people cry all day. Because I've had more than one lady come up to me and sit there and say, oh, I just talked to Michael Medved. He says it's 60-40, they're going to pass it.
It was one lady. It was only
and
one.
And she searched me out. And she said, Michael Medved said 60-40, what do you say? And I said, Michael who?
No, I didn't say the vote was going to be 60-40. To answer the second question first that Governor Perry asked, this is one of those things where the Democratic Party, there's a kamikaze aspect to this whole thing. And it goes along with this arrogance, the idea that we have to show courage like they showed when they established Social Security. Social Security was established with a majority of the Republicans in Congress supporting it. It was overwhelming. Roosevelt built a consensus behind it. And they don't have that here. I think it would be worse for them if this thing is defeated. And I think that's why so many of them are getting ready to walk the plank. Because if it's put into play, they can at least point to an accomplishment. If it's defeated, it's all dirt and ashes, and it's bad for them.
I think there's an area we forget. Let's bring the media into play, all right? Which side is the media on here? And they want to get this thing done. They want to get it done by Friday of this week. And then you now go through April, you go through May, June, July, August, September, October. And what you're going to hear from the people who voted for it, from the left, from the Democrats, and Barack Obama is this. We passed health care. You still have your insurance, don't you? Did you lose your insurance? Did you lose your insurance?
Yeah.
Because I will tell you, most people don't know it doesn't start till 2013. Taxes start tomorrow. But 2013 is when it kicks in. Why 2013? Because it doesn't matter what happens to the economy after 2013. He's not running again. You're not going to run for a third term. They want to be able to say, we voted for it. All the things that Michael Medved said and all the other talk show hosts said about this haven't come true. We've done a great job. Vote for us and move on. And unfortunately, you've got an American public who has an attention span about this big. And let me tell you, talk radio, which is great, goes on the issue of the day, and this will be forgotten to an extent. It won't be talked about like it's being talked about today. But you'll have the liberal media every day, hey, you still have your health care, don't you? And my worry is they pass it Friday. We're not going to be able to unwind it. And the fact is they very well could win re-election in November because people say, didn't hurt me at all.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a very important, one of the questions that we ask is, you know, what can you do? I mean, what is your role to play? And as we go through the next 3 days, your engagement in it is very important. The people that you know, I mean, they're, you know, I don't know how a Democrat in the state of Texas can vote for this bill. No, I mean, it is a $24 billion price tag for the state of Texas over the next 10 years. $2.4 billion of your tax money, their tax money. And if for no other reason than the economic impact on the state of Texas, I mean, that's not even to mention the quality of health care that's going to go down. I mean, there's not a kid in America that's going to want to be a doctor.
Well, yeah, listen, when I was 21 or you were 21 or Mike, you were 21, were we thinking about health care? We were thinking like, where are we going tonight? And say, now you're going to go to those kids and say, we're going to fine you because you weren't thinking about health care. I mean, it's just absolutely, you know, outrageous at that point. But understand this, this has nothing to do with health care. This is about power. This is about saying, I control your health care. And as long as I control your health care, I control you. And that's where they're trying, that's why people say, well, but America's speaking out against it. Why are they doing this? Because it's not about health care. It's just like, how many people have been elected to anything by saying, if you elect me, I'll get rid of Social Security? Huh? Third rail. Well, there's going to be a new third rail. Because you're not going to be able to go out there and say, if you elect me, I'm going to get rid of your health care. Really? And guess what happens? It stays and it grows and it grows. How many of you now have heard, because I know Mike's played, nobody else, my dad's 1961 talk on socialized medicine. Yeah. That had to do with Medicare. 1961, socialized medicine. He laid out exactly how it was going to play. And that is exactly what is going on today.
His principles were timeless.
Absolutely.
And by the way, speaking of timeless, love is fleeting, but entitlements are forever. And they are, and you end up paying for them forever. And our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Two things very quickly on this. I think Governor Perry raises a tremendously important point. What can you do? And this goes to a point that Mike Reagan made on my radio show this afternoon. And it's a brilliant point, and it's very, very important. Normally, members of Congress, members of the state legislature, governors, only hear from people when they're ticked off. This is a chance. Find those Democrats who voted no the first time or flipped over to no this time, and there are a bunch of them, particularly the pro-life Democrats. Write to them, say, attaboy, we're with you. We're going to stand with you. We won't forget. You stand with us on this, and because it's that important. And really, it's not just hitting the people who are backstabbing and turning this thing around, but encouraging the people who will stand with the American people and stand with the people of Texas right now. And there are a number of members of the congressional delegation in the state of Texas who are going to be absolutely crucial to this final outcome. Yeah. And it could go either way.
Very much so.
The other aspect I want to talk about, a lot of people are talking about the slaughter scenario and the idea that this is not even going to have an up or down vote and it's going to be deemed as having passed. I've become convinced of this. I think that's just a head fake. I don't think they're actually going to push it through that way. And why are they doing that head fake? Two reasons. Number one, so that when it comes Friday, they can say, okay, we heard the American people, now we're going to compromise. And our compromise is not that we're going to abandon a 2,700 pages, it's up to 2,700 pages. Not that we're going to compromise on a 2,700-page monstrosity, we're going to compromise on the slaughter scenario. We'll do an up or down vote, which the Republicans have been screaming about all week, and then they have the up or down vote, and God forbid 1,000 times they win by 1 or 2 or 3 votes. That's one thing. The other thing is, right now, people in D.C. are largely arguing about process. They're largely arguing about mechanics. Any day that we take the focus away from what this means for the average American, we shouldn't argue about the mechanics. We shouldn't argue about reconciliation. We should talk about what a nightmare this is going to be for every single American. And then when this happens, if this thing passes, which I hope and I honestly pray that it does not, but if it passes, how many people here have ever had anything frustrating happen with an insurance company, with a doctor? Every darn miscue, every frustration that occurs from here on in, if you have a frustration with your doctor, if he misprescribes something, if you can't get an appointment, if the insurance rates go up, and they will, it's Obama's fault, and he should be made to own it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well said. There were a number of questions from the audience that all basically followed the same line of questioning, and I need to address it because it comes to me, and it's a good time, I think, to segue in. And what can the state of Texas do, God forbid, if this health care bill passes? And we were asked that question last night, and I got kind of passionate about it because the fact of the matter is that's the wrong question to be asking right now, and I'm saying that with all due respect. What we need to be focused on, what we need to have every ounce of our core working towards is stopping the passage of this. Not sitting here going, okay, now what are we going to do? I mean, don't cede any land in this battle. I mean, we're going to fight for every inch of this. So don't back up at all from the standpoint of making a statement and saying, look, they're going to pass this thing, because I'm not convinced that they are. I think that the American people are powerful, and they are united, and they are vocal. I put this kind of in the same category. Someone said, well, are you going to choose chemotherapy or are you going to choose radiation? I said, well, wait a minute, what are you talking about? I said, well, you know, you're going to get cancer. I'm kind of like, well, figure out what it is that's going to give you cancer and stop that before you sit and worry about, you know, what the very bad dilemma that you would be put into. But the fact is, we need to be really focused on how we as a people continue to push back.
You'd only get the chemotherapy or radiation if the death panel approved it.
Hey, here's kind of a not necessarily a lighthearted one, but one that
something else that people that they really have not talked about much in Washington or on talk radio also. You know, they keep on talking about a public option. Folks, Medicare is the public option. You want to know about the public option? It's already there and it's broke.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely bankrupt.
Yeah, it's broke.
And people forget about that at 65 years of age, if you're privately insured, right now, if you're privately insured, when you turn 65, you lose that insurance. Your insurance company says, thank you, goodbye. And you're forced now to go to Medicare and get in the Medicare game. And then, of course, this goes on, and they want to cut $500 billion out of Medicare. So it really can open up that door to what is ultimately going to happen, because the government's already at that point with Medicare, which is bankrupt, which my father said it would be, 1961.
Yeah. So here are three names. Rahm Emanuel, Janet Napolitano, Eric Holder. Which one of these members of President Obama's team will be the first to go?
Among those three.
Those three.
Can you choose all of the above? No, it's.
You get rid of Obama, you get rid of all of them.
Yeah. My guess right now is if with God's help, healthcare is defeated this week, Rahm Emanuel.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that would be,
good.
that has
he's
to
the
be the only
scapegoat.
choice.
Yeah.
Because Rahm Emanuel's the one, I don't even want to think about that visual with,
Let's not talk about Eric Massa.
whoa,
This is a
my
Baptist
God.
University.
I know, the visual just, oh my.
No, I'm not going to tickle you, Mike.
I know. At my 50th birthday party, we'll have a tickle party. But but no, I think Rahm Emanuel, if they lose this, he has to go. Now the question is,
There'll be a
he may
head roll.
put in his resignation. Would Barack Obama accept it?
Yeah, good one. Here, as we start getting close to wrapping up here, this is a question from the audience for you, Michael Reagan. Said, if your father could whisper in your ear tonight, what would he tell you to tell us?
Well, there they go again.
You're awesome, man.
I scare family members with that, you know. No, he would, you know, something. He would just follow your heart and do the right thing. He would stay the course. I mean, his whole life was staying the course. He was so consistent through all of his life. He didn't change from day to day. Didn't wake up in the morning, say what polls are saying today. How am I going to feel today? He knew how he felt from the core. My father's conservatism was in his DNA. It really was. When I go speak to young people with Young America's Foundation who bought the ranch and so on, I tell them, those who weren't even born when my father was president, just learning about him, one thing they learn is the fact that they could go out today and be surrogate speakers on his behalf and never miss a stroke, just thinking about the questions that would be asked about big government. And so often we do give up. And you look at my dad in his career, he just never gave up, no matter where he was in his career. You know, things weren't always that great in Hollywood. I always kid the liberals saying, you know, if you'd supported my father as an actor, you wouldn't have to deal with him as governor and president. But, you know, all through his career, he had a steady lines. 1961, when he did the record and the statement on socialized medicine, he wasn't even thinking, he hadn't even thought about giving a speech for Barry Goldwater. And Ronald Reagan was a Democrat, liberal Democrat in 1961 when he gave that address, not a conservative Republican. And it would be 3 more years before he would give the whole Barry Goldwater speech. Then he had to make a decision to run for governor, and then, of course, ultimately the presidency of the United States. But the consistency of his beliefs all the way through. 1962, he's debating Bobby Kennedy, and Bobby Kennedy says, "So what can my brother do to show you, to show that he's going to uplift America in a debate?" My father said to him, "You tell your brother to tear down that wall in Berlin." 1962. 25 years later, he stands before the Brandenburg Gate and says, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Consistency through his whole life and never losing track of who he was and where he was going. And he put America first every single time. And I tell people when I go out, because people are looking for Ronald Reagan, I think one of the biggest mistakes the Republican Party can make is look for Ronald Reagan. We should be blessed that we had Ronald Reagan as President of the United States. He was one of ours. And if you wake up in the morning and you yearn to be free and have less government, have your children better educated, and wish for that same freedom in other parts of the world, then you really have Ronald Reagan living inside of you. You've got him. So don't let him hide. Let him come out and go out there and fight the good battle and never give up. And remember, The guys on the other side are working 24 hours a day to undermine the foundations of this country. If you're not working 24 hours a day to stop them, they're going to win every time.
Very good. I'm going to go wrap it up. Listen, give these great panelists a big rousing applause here as we finish up tonight.
If I just say one more thing, I left talk radio June 5th of last year. I was in it for a lot of years and loved it. These guys do a great job. But there's great guys like Michael Medved doing radio. I left because my sister Maureen, in 2001, when she lay dying of melanoma in a hospital in Los Angeles, called me into the room and said, you know, our father has a wonderful legacy. And somebody in this family's got to pick it up and move it forward and tell the world about it. And that's what we're doing with the Legacy Foundation, what have you. But I'm doing a lot more politically also. I endorsed the governor in his primary win just a couple of weeks ago. I'll be here to work with him.
Thank you.
For the governorship as I'm going across the country on the political side. If you really want to help, you know, help conservatives, if you have an email address, most likely Google and all these people, they give money to liberals. We just started the Reagan.com, which has been there for a long time. The Reagan.com has just become an ISP. And I will guarantee you this, if you get a Reagan.com email address, you can go to Reagan.com to get it. If you get an email address, I will promise you, money will not flow to liberal causes in America. It'll go to save this union, not to kill it.
Thank you. Listen, that pretty much concludes the evening. And again, it's been a great honor for me to be here with these two individuals who I've got the most, I've got such great respect for what they do and the audiences that they impact across the country. And again, to Michael, both Michaels, thank you for letting me just have a small part in tonight. And thank you all for being here. It gives me such great energy to be able to come and interact with people who believe and know in their heart that America is a great country. People who understand intuitively that this country that we live in at its core is a great and a wonderful place, and you care enough about its history and its future to be engaged in this process that we're going through. America was great, is great, and will continue to be great because we value freedom above all else. And if there is anything that Ronald Reagan understood and proclaimed, it was that freedom. It was that liberty is what will continue to take this country forward. And we all have our concerns. We have the concerns about the encroachments on our rights, the encroachments that we see that are going on from Washington, D.C. And I tell people, I said, take out your cell phone tonight and just type in the word fed up, F-E-D-U-P. If you're fed up with what's going on in Washington, D.C., and then text it to, I think, 95613. 95613. And we'll keep you in the loop on what we're doing in Austin and keeping the pressure on D.C. and let you know what we're going to be doing over the course of the next 72 hours relative to continuing to put the pressure on those individuals. And as Michael Medved said, to tell those folks thank you that are standing up to probably unbearable pressure from Nancy Pelosi and the Obama administration trying to pass this health care through. So as we close here this evening, I just want to remind all of you, no matter what Washington does, we're all incredibly blessed. We are blessed to live in a world that God has created. He covers up this world with the signs of His presence every day. We're blessed to live in a nation where we're free to speak our mind. You think about all of those places that you've been and you've visited where they're afraid to do that. Not here. We're blessed to live in a state where conservative principles still carry the day. And in the days to come, let's just all agree that we're going to continue to stay very informed on the issues, that we'll share that information with our friends and our neighbors. You know, sometimes whether they want to hear it or not, we're still going to share it with them, and work to make your voice heard. Whether it's picking up the phone, or whether it's writing letters, whether it's emailing, whether it's, you know, tweeting or Facebooking, or I found a new one today called Go Walla. So that one is a little new social media for you, Michael. So anyway, it's, and I might add, Texas-based, Go Walla, G-O-W-A-L-L-A. Y'all look that up. That's kind of an interesting one. But anyway, we have Washington's attention. We can change the direction of this country. And through you, may God continue to bless the great state of Texas. Thank you for coming and being with us tonight.